Hello, everyone. Welcome to Archaeology Hour, the online lecture series of the Archaeological Institute of America. I have the great honor of hosting tonight's lecture. I'm Jacqueline Meyer, Vice President of the AIA Jacksonville Society, and I'm also Assistant Professor of Anthropology at the University of North Florida. So thank you for joining us today for Archaeology Hour. If you're looking for some of those recordings after the program as well, you can find them through many of these social media outlets if you're looking for our recording after today's lecture. I am the proud vice president of the Archaeological Institute of Society, Archaeological Institute of America, Jacksonville Society, located in Jacksonville, Florida. And we are a thriving society here in the northern part of Florida. We've got 81 current members. Our society works hard to host 8 lectures per year, 7 of which we self-sponsor. And we have annual member appreciation events for our community, which you see some photos of here. And we really try to make opportunities for early career archaeologists as well to present and also to be a part of the governance of our society. So you can see some of our undergraduate board members here as well. We've worked very hard. We've earned in the past the AIA Foot Soldier Award. You can see our founder here, Melva Price, who was honored with that award. And we've also won the Golden Trowel Award recently, so we're very proud of our achievements as a society. If you live in the Jacksonville area or even in southern Georgia or within a nice drive of our society, we'd really invite you to come and join us. Our website, aiajax.org, has all the information where you can do that. So I'd encourage you to join us. Everyone's welcome. The AIA truly does make archaeology possible or accessible to many people. Attending an annual meeting as an undergraduate is really what inspired me to follow a career path in archaeology myself, and I know that it has for many other people as well. The support from this organization is really life-changing to many archaeologists, but also for many archaeology enthusiasts. My own society is mainly made up of archaeology enthusiasts. We have a few professors. We've got students, and the students are growing and attending more and more of our lectures every year. But really, the AIA gives back most in my area to the public, and we're very proud of that. And so I hope that you'll also be a part of your local AIA societies and join them in making archaeology happen all over the world. If you're fascinated with archaeology, an AIA membership also includes the excellent Archaeology magazine, which I know lots of you look forward to having. I love when it arrives. I can sit down with my coffee and read about what other researchers are working on around the world. I hope that you subscribe to become a member today if you aren't already. Because you can get this exciting magazine, and you also have other great opportunities through an AIA membership. You can find the extensive list of fieldwork opportunities, which I know is invaluable to my own students. You can get lots of information about local archaeology affairs and events, and you can also join in on some of the excellent AIA tours, which take place all over the world. Becoming an AIA member is easy. You can get the information here through your link also to join the talk today, or by scanning this QR code here. And it does, again, come with many great benefits. You get affiliated with a local society that is close-knit. I hope that many of you see our tight-knit Jacksonville community here in the chat. We work very closely together to make this society great, but we also take a big role in our community. We bring our members in for local excavations and really give them a chance to experience archaeology firsthand. But every society has different kinds of benefits. So all of them have these benefits that you see here, where you can get a subscription to Archaeology magazine, discounts on annual meeting registration, and some discounts on AIA tours as well. All of these things, though, are made possible with the great generosity and support of donors and members. So please don't forget to make a gift today to support archaeological research, site preservation, publication, and all the great things that the AIA supports through its mission. Tonight is the second to last lecture in this year's online program. You can see how many wonderful lectures the AIA has supported this year. Please return next time for the final lecture in the series, which is by Dr. Mark Aldendorfer of the University of California, Merced. He'll be talking about Tibetan and Himalayan afterlife. I'm very excited for this upcoming lecture as well. But of course, what I'm most excited about is our lecture tonight, our lecture by Dr. Rosemary Joyce. This lecture is a live presentation and it's being recorded by the AIA, so you don't need to record it yourself. You can find this recording on the YouTube page for the Archaeological Institute of America after this program concludes. So other kinds of recording are strictly prohibited. Thank you for cooperating. All right. Well, I have the great pleasure tonight and the great honor to introduce our lecturer tonight, which is Dr. Rosemary Joyce. Dr. Joyce is professor of anthropology at the University of California at Berkeley. Dr. Joyce is a museum anthropologist and is incredibly influential in archaeology theory, especially in the area of materiality. Her research focus is in Honduras, and she was a Smithsonian Fellow, a Fulbright Fellow, among many honors that would probably take our whole archaeology hour for me to list off. So without further ado, I'll introduce Dr. Joyce. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I hope that you all can see the slides, and I want to begin by thanking the AIA for this opportunity to share with people the work that I've been doing on understanding complex society without rulers, work that's been inspired by my lifetime of research in Honduras. For many people, the word archaeology conjures up images of monuments, traces of the lives of powerful rulers, who can come to seem to be inevitable parts of any urban agricultural society. But there are other stories archaeology can tell about societies where there is no apparent ruler, but where many of the hallmarks of complex society are found. And today I'm going to explore one such society, the ancient Ulúa culture of northern Honduras, neighbors to classic Maya states, a place where people used religion to reinforce social relations in a society of wealthy farmers who enjoyed artworks of extraordinary beauty. This is a region that's been insistently viewed through an archaeological expectation that hierarchy inevitably increases. From this perspective, the patterns my colleagues and I have documented through decades of modern field archaeology are viewed as evidence of stagnation and failure. My own work has been oriented to trying to understand the region without that perspective, what the pioneering archaeologist Payson Sheets called the pervasive pejorative in studies of Central America. I argue that some of the ways visual materials, like this Ulúa polychrome vessel painted in the 8th or 9th century, have been interpreted, erase the active role of visual culture in crafting and maintaining less hierarchy, or as I'll argue today, more freedom over a long span of continuous occupation persisting even after European colonization. And I have to say, I just got a message that the host has asked me to start my video.
It does appear you have come off camera.
There you go. Sorry about that. Don't know what happened. Okay, so consider two apparently similar ceramic vessels, the left-hand one from the classic Maya lowlands, the right-hand one from the Ulúa region in Honduras. To understand them, I need to contextualize them within the social worlds of which each is a product. Both just more imposing position, yet the activities presented in each scene are different. So are the visual and everyday engagements of the people who use we need to see these images as different rather than merging them together, but to allow us to see the visual negotiation and affirmation of distinct forms of social relations in these neighboring but fundamentally different social worlds. My talk today draws on published analyses of visual culture in the Ulúa tradition by my colleagues and myself. This visual culture is embodied in painted vessels and three-dimensional ceramic sculptures, some small and the size of figurines, and others much larger. I've reviewed thousands of examples of Ulúa tradition objects in museum collections in doing this work. In our books, we place these museum objects in relation to examples we excavated that let us understand how they were actually made and used. In this talk, I'm extending work on inequality that I began to develop in the early 1990s. At that time, I drew on theories of heterarchy to shift the narrative of news media reports of a new civilization in Honduras to represent the emerging understanding that in the area where I worked, there was a society of prosperous farmers who maintained a stable way of life for hundreds of years without exaggerated inequality while producing exceptional works of art. This ongoing work is part of a book manuscript in progress, conceptualized as being about social limitations on inequality and the creation of sustainable ways of life by ancestral Lenca people of northern Honduras. The people who between 800 and 1100 AD created Cerro Palenque, my dissertation site. While Cerro Palenque was the largest settlement in the pre-Hispanic Ulúa Valley, in absolute size, it was small, and there was no evidence for pronounced differences between rulers or chiefs and the rest of the population. I viewed this as a case of limitation of inequality. More recently, following Graeber and Wengrow's call in The Dawn of Everything to pursue the question of freedoms, I have turned to trying to explore the three freedoms they single out: the freedom of people to move, the freedom of people to refuse to follow orders, and the freedom of people to create new forms of social relations. Shifting my emphasis to freedom from inequality allows me to more successfully interpret the archaeological materials my colleagues and I have documented. It aligns the new narratives I'm developing better with contemporary scholarship in Indigenous studies and with the worldviews of the descendants of the people who created the sites and artworks that I study. The artworks I study were produced and used in a series of valleys formed by the Ulúa River and its major tributaries. The region historically was occupied by ancestors of people speaking languages today collectively referred to as Lenca. Lenca descendant communities today offer me guidance for understanding ancient Lenca philosophy, orientations that reiterate a second, and to my mind, equally important claim made in The Dawn of Everything, that indigenous societies of the Americas had a philosophical critique of European society with its inequality and its individualism. For contemporary Lenca people in Honduras, interdependence between humans and non-humans and among human communities is an ultimate value to be reproduced and protected through ceremonies whose Spanish name comes from the word for to repair. In these events, humans share meals with non-human spirits that are housed temporarily in objects, some of them anthropomorphic, but many others formed by plants or made in the images of plants. Despite the silences in colonial archives, where all the voices of Lenca people are represented in Spanish, we can still see echoes of such a concern for relations with the animate earth and the interdependence of communities, motivating Lenca ancestors living in the region under Spanish administration. The document I'm showing you here comes from the valley where I work. In 1679, the leaders of the community petitioned to move their town in order to protect their capacity to produce cacao, which was necessary so that the earth would not suffer, the animate earth, and that the people who depended on them would be able to continue to depend on them. My own fieldwork took place at the northern edge of ancestral Lenca territory, here shown in yellow and labeled Toquegua Zone, in the lower Ulúa River Valley, a 2,400 square kilometer or 800 square mile zone of tropical riverine lowlands along the Caribbean coast. and in the adjacent Ulúa and Catuana valleys on a tributary of the Ulúa River. In the 16th century, the Ulúa Valley was an area noted for wealth in cacao, the source of chocolate, metal ore, and valuable bird feathers. Early Spanish colonial sources identified some of the people of this area with the word Toquegua. Documentary analysis shows this was a family name and the name of a specific town. The Toquegua name was carried by leading families in indigenous towns in the valley well into the colonial period, including the town official of Hetegua, Luis Toquegua. Anthropologists in the 20th century used this personal name as a label for the language spoken in the region. More recent research shows that these towns were home to multilingual communities, with people speaking the Lenca language from birth, in addition to having knowledge of Yucatec Maya and the international trade language, Nahuatl. 16th century Spanish adventurers were drawn to the region by rumors of wealth, rumors they heard from trading partners in far western Yucatan. In towns like Naco, they found communities engaged in long-distance trade in cacao, quetzal feathers, and copper objects that spread their reputation as far as the western Maya area, the boundary of the Mexica or Aztec Empire. These were towns with cosmopolitan families who aligned themselves with nobles in Yucatan. The painted pottery these families used presented images of a serpent bird, a symbol of cultural significance for community leaders throughout this region. The serpent bird had a long history here. It ornamented painted pottery produced by the predecessors of the 16th century Toquegua going back to at least 800 AD. The uniformity of imagery, though, followed a long period from 500 to 1000 AD, when much more varied ceramic objects were created in this region, in what we today call the Ulúa tradition. It's with this history that I'm primarily concerned today. Our archaeological investigations demonstrate that Ulúa tradition figurines and painted pots were produced in workshops dispersed throughout the region. Multiple objects present the same images. For example, this figural musical instrument in the form of a crocodilian, and the very similar mold for another such figurine, but not the same. It would have differed in the direction its tail turned. Archaeologist Jeannie Lupipero has shown that molds like this one ensured the reproduction of desired imagery. They were not used for production of multiple copies. This isn't mass production. Lupipero suggests molds were made to ensure that less skilled hands could produce correct and legible images necessary for ritual. My own work on polychrome painted pottery reached similar conclusions. The repeated reproduction of similar images resulted from a skilled form of artisanry whose aim was to produce a series rather than to produce unique objects like the kind prized by modern art collectors. The Ulúa styles developed along the drainage of the Ulúa River, shown here in pink. To the west was another broad region where visual culture followed standards set by the classic Maya city-state, Copan. At Copan, inscribed texts on stone monuments present a political landscape characterized by hierarchy. The transcript on monuments at Copan deals with the actions of heads of state. In the Ulúa region, in contrast, the expression of hierarchy is muted or absent. Stone sculpture, when it is made, which is rarely, is not a medium for inscribing names and deeds of individual people, but rather serves to distinguish some buildings, corporate places. The largest settlement known in the history of the Ulúa Valley, Cerro Palenque, is half the size of Copan when we use building counts as a measure. A leading family there enjoyed better access to imported stone used for tools, but there's not the kind of extreme distinction between that household and others in architectural volume or investment of materials the kind of thing we do see at Copan. These differences raise a question that's usually framed as what prevented the Ulúa region from reaching the level of the state? That question presumes states are inevitable or even desirable developments. My question's different. What kind of social relations existed in this region, and how should they be understood? Are the human subjects that we see in the visual culture of the Ulúa region best interpreted as would-be Maya rulers who were less successful, heads of chiefdoms that got stuck on their way to becoming states, or something else entirely? What would a complex society without rulers look like? The database for understanding Ulúa Valley society is strong. In settlement surveys carried out between 1979 and 1983, in which I participated, we located remains of over 500 pre-Hispanic settlements, the majority contemporary with the late classic city-state of Copan. Studies of stereo air photos at a scale of 1 to 20,000 showed that the settlements occupied between 500 and 1000 AD are distributed nearly continuously along the past river courses. Most of these sites are composed of clusters of earthen platforms. Excavations show that these mounds once supported largely perishable structures, residences of farmers. Around such structures, our excavations recovered the discarded remains of stone tools for cutting, grinding, and crushing plants and food preparation, along with polychrome painted vessels used for food serving, and sometimes tools for household-based craft production, like making figural musical instruments. In the Ulúa River Valley bottomlands, groups of buildings like these were reconstructed repeatedly over generations. Some locations were occupied for hundreds of years, creating an archive of interred ancestors and the refuse resulting from the everyday life of farmers. Here you are seeing the cross-section from one of my excavations at a site called Travessia that can be analyzed in terms of up to 7 generations of people living and rebuilding in the same place, even as the river continuously flooded. Our research also identified larger towns. A few, including downtown Travessia, have been the focus of excavation and speculation since the 19th century. Travessia and other towns have some larger stone structures and special purpose architecture such as ball courts. At Travessia, some of the buildings were plastered with thick white stucco and provided with stone roof ornaments carved with unique imagery. Tenon bird heads may have been ball court markers or else protruded from other buildings. Ulúa visual culture present at small and large sites gives us images of interdependence, action by groups, and employs no practices to identify specific people, as is the case of the nobility commemorated at Copan. The painted polychrome ceramics made at Travessia, used by its most prominent family for everyday meals, present an anthropomorphized monkey as the focal actor, not a human being at all. Anthropomorphic figurines from Travessia repeatedly present us images of pairs, their body features uniform, joined into single subjects. Objects like these polychrome pots and figurines are products of Ulúa traditional craft production. They consistently picture collaboration by groups of people rather than highlighting individual human actors. The most elaborate human figures are individualized. They wear distinctive headdresses, have distinct patterns of body painting, may present filed teeth or other body modifications that are associated with more limited statuses, and they may wear distinctive pendants. Body features and patterns of dress may denote sex or gender. Many of these are constructed as pairs, and some can be interpreted as male-female couples, presented as unified subjects in action. The context of Ulúa tradition artworks offers particular promise for archaeological visions of alternative histories to the highly hierarchical kind that has dominated our understanding. This is a social world that has been characterized pejoratively as non-state, or apparently less dismissively as pre-state. When described as pre-state, the Ulúa world is imagined as composed of chiefdoms on their way to becoming states. They're implicitly failed states because they never became sufficiently hegemonic, sufficiently unequal to join the ranks of more advanced civilizations. Viewed through the evolutionary lens that has been normative for understanding political organization in this area, we could map the lower Ulúa Valley as divided in multiple territories, as you see on the left, equally sized hinterlands of the towns in which ball courts are found. The largest of these towns might have had thousands of residents. A few, like Cerro Palenque, grew so quickly that they must have formed from in-migration, a town emerging from the assembly of people with diverse origins who previously lived in the rural hinterland. The boundaries we can draw, equidistant from the attractions of neighboring towns, however, do not delimit differences in the style of objects. They don't tell us that there's interruptions in the continuous distributions that we see along the waterways of the houses of farmers. These are two different visualizations, two maps of the same territory. One, on the left, assumes the presence of a pre-state cluster of chiefdoms. The other, on the right, envisions farmers living in homesteads located according to the logics of water and soil, of histories of dwelling, of relations to place and ancestors. Some families, especially long-lived, developed distinctive forms of engagement as hosts of ball games, dances, and other events, to which people could come, but were under no evident compulsion to attend. Along with my colleagues Julia Hendon and Jeannie Lopipero, I've suggested that if we shift frames from the political or nation-state perspective to the social, the Ulúa region makes sense as an example of what archaeologist Carol Crumley called heterarchy. Rather than failed states, the region's a testament to the multiple ways that people related to each other, some in tension, others more harmonious, social relations that proved sustainable for very long periods of time. Crumley was writing about medieval France and pointed out that there was no single organizational framework. Religion, the craft guilds, the political authorities, each would have given us a different map of power. That fundamental idea of heterarchy is what we have been playing with since the 1990s in this region. In our first forays into this alternative way of viewing mysteries, Julia Hendon and I showed that in one 95 square kilometer region on a tributary of the Ulúa River, social relations that connected people were really only visible if we added the motivations of farmers to the standard approach of settlement hierarchy, which was developed to detect chiefdoms and archaic states. The distribution of living sites in this area follows watercourses and access to arable land. But there's a second factor discernible here, a seasonal rhythm for the dispersed population to assemble in a few distinctive places. These were places that hosted ball games. We documented an unexpectedly high frequency of ball courts in this relatively small area. They occurred in two different configurations. Some with shorter playing alleys were accompanied by one other monumental building. These ball courts, like the one on the left, were oriented slightly east of north. Others with longer alleys oriented along a northwest to southeast axis form parts of larger plazas with multiple monumental structures. Rather than see these as two levels of a single political hierarchy, We identified them as nodes in different patterns of seasonal circulation. Ball courts with longer alleys were found in more central locations along the main rivers. Their alleys were oriented toward the winter sunrise, and they're shown here in blue. Ball courts with shorter alleys and less monumental construction were located in places more removed from the main rivers. Their alleys faced the horizon of summer sunrise, and they're shown here in red. Public performances and participation in them varied by season. During the summer, when care for plants in the fields would have counseled restrictions on travel, farming families might still participate in solstice ceremonies at ball courts located away from the major rivers that were closer to their fields. In winter, after the harvest, people might take advantage of the break in seasonal agricultural tasks to travel longer distances to the central, larger, more centrally located ball courts. The dominance of places with ball courts was thus temporary, seasonal, shifting. They were potential gathering places that anyone could use freedom of movement to visit, where different forms of social life were shaped throughout the year, but no one was compelled to attend. In counterpoint to these places of seasonal ceremony, houses were distributed continually along river courses according to the practicalities of agriculture. This, we argued, was an example of the core idea of heterarchy, which imagines a landscape fragmented under different structures of control. In my current work, I'm moving beyond our initial efforts anchored in the concept of heterarchy to engage with theories of anarchic social life, returning to our initial observation that the settlement distribution in these valleys seemed unstructured. Concepts from anarchy theory have, David Graeber argued, long been part of anthropological thought about such things as value, exchange, and the kinds of social relations that develop through the circulation of materials. Archaeologists working in a number of areas have begun to engage with anarchy theory. Whoops, there we go. For instance, to explore how people in the past resisted pressures towards centralization. Angel, Beck, and Greer present coast-Salish history of the U.S. Northwest as marked by a lack of formalized government, without centralized authority, alongside social complexity, that is, diversity in social positions, and a rich body of technologies used to enhance daily life and periodic celebrations. They assert that an anarchist theory of history, and I quote, emphasizes an ongoing and active resistance to concentrations of power, end quote. They provide an analysis that seeks evidence of this kind of resistance. The late history of Travessia, one of the larger towns in the lower Ulúa Valley, provides an opportunity to explore similar events, while considering how to take another step away from a focus on inequality toward an interest in freedom and cooperation, the values emphasized by Lenca people. Travessia's town center was formed by a cluster of buildings, including a ball court built in an open plan, potentially inviting circulating visitors, adjacent to a raised enclosed residential compound. This is the kind of building archaeologists in Central America are used to identifying as the residence of a political authority, a chief. Archaeologist Christina Luke has convincingly argued that the family living in this closed compound patronized crafting of carved marble vases made of locally available material between 600 and 800 AD. These intricate works were sent as gifts to families in the Maya lowlands of Guatemala and Belize, as well as to distant southern partners living as far away as what today is Costa Rica. They ended up as possessions of people archaeologists regard as rulers of city-states and others who are seen as leaders of chiefdoms. Reciprocal gifts of polychrome pottery and of the most precious materials made by these distant partners, jade and copper gold alloys, came back to the Travessia marble crafting patrons. Some Ulúa marble vases were distributed to people in other towns within the valley. Yet the majority of valley settlements didn't participate in exchanges of these stone objects at all. As is visible here, where white dots mark sites with Ulúa marble vases, few of the larger towns and none of the smaller ones has evidence of these objects. Instead, a vibrant local production of ceramic effigies of Ulúa marble vessels developed, using the mold technology that was already central to the visual culture of the region. These ceramic effigies of marble vases were produced in decentralized workshops with chemical composition reflecting diverse origins outside the Travessia hinterland. Rather than responding to Travessia's monopoly on white stone vases by entering into relations of dependency to acquire them, the majority of Travessia's neighbors made their own marble vases from clay, using thick white slip to cover their clay core. Anthropomorphic figurines represent women holding vases of this kind in shared ritual practices. In these clay works, Ulúa crafters eliminated the frontal anthropomorphic faces of marble vases, their most novel visual element, the only feature that centered individual humans. Ulúa people were not just subject to multiple overlapping hierarchies. These materials are traces of their exercise of freedoms that Travessia's leading family found no way to revoke, refusals of an assertion of hierarchy by that family. Travessia's family pursued its freedom to attempt to create new forms of social relations, but they were incapable of imposing demands on the people of the valley, who exercised their freedom to refuse to follow orders. Ulúa people in situations like this avoided falling into more enduring hierarchical structures. In the words of James Scott, they practiced the art of not being governed. And part of the way they did that was by crafting and use of things, world making that refused centralization and control. I ask, what happens if we take Scott's art of not being governed literally, taking art to mean visual culture? What is the art of the ungoverned, the visual culture that establishes social relations with a minimum of inequality, or to maintain my focus on not seeing like a state, with a maximum of freedom? We can return to this evocative Ulúa pot. Are these visual relations of hierarchy or of other forms of difference and connection? In pre-Hispanic Central America, being seated on a platform, bench, or mat, the sign that appears in the carved upper band here, singles out a social position different from that of other people. But it's only in the minds of viewers who see all difference in terms of hierarchy that this must imply an enduring power to command. When we place the visual image in its proper material form and turn the vessel around, we see the minimization of the seated figure in favor of the others shown. These are dancers and ritualists. They occupy the majority of the visual space. They have by far more detailed and infinitely more legible visual signs making up their appearance than the human figure crouched in the house, who's subordinated to that building and its adornment. The dancers wear elaborate costumes with many, many details. They're dressed identically, and none of these figures is labeled with a sign that might specifically name them. Signs carved in the band over the scene alternate a mat and another symbol for a central place, neither sign consistently aligned with any of the figures below. The absence of text labeling people is intentional. Ulúa people knew about Maya writing. They deployed some of its signs on pots, in particular this one, which is understood to refer to the animacy of the painted vessel itself. We need to place Ulúa polychrome pots with narrative scenes within their own history. In that history, in fact, multi-figure compositions featuring humans are both late and rare. The earliest human figures are singular or repeated in series. They engage with non-human objects like the masks facing this seated figure. On many vessels, the central subjects are actually the non-humans. For example, the headdresses shown here and the mats that alternate with them, which are placed in the position of active subjects with no human characters at all. On many vessels, the central subjects are animals. While modern observers, collectors, and museum curators privilege late Ulúa polychromes with multiple human figures engaged in narrative action, even in the latest period, human subjects like the one shown here are more often presented in series. They are interchangeable and they alternate with non-human subjects, like the feline shown here. From the first inclusion of anthropomorphic figures to the end of the Ulúa painted pottery tradition, the emphasis on humans is as performers in ritual, with no focus on their individual identity. Instead, the story we're presented is about the regalia that made them ritually powerful: masks, back racks, staffs, and headdresses. These vessels elevate belonging, being part of a series as a valued position through the medium of skilled painting, used not to produce unique images of individualized actors, but to make pots that repeatedly reiterate shared participation in ritual processions, dances, and offerings. It's the collective agency of groups that enable the kind of actions shown, in which vessels, figural instruments, and other regalia were active. Painted vessels, turned from one view to another, present each participant as of equal visual importance. Does the pair of figures carrying the incense-burning vessel and incense bag, shown at the far right and the rollout, lead the procession or end it? Are the musicians playing rattles and flutes, setting the pace, or accompanying the incense burners? It makes very little sense to try to impose a logic of individualism, of hierarchy, on visuality so insistent on relationality and the combination of participants in action. In this Ulúa world, non-humans, not only animals, but also figural sculptures, musical instruments, masks, and other regalia, even the painted vessels themselves, are subjects. The effects these things have are a product of collaborating assemblages of people and non-humans. At Travessia, the reproduction of small-scale ceramic sculptures of paired humans provides the only abundant anthropomorphic imagery. Their individuality is obscured. As Julia Hendon notes, they routinely share a visual detail, a single circle standing for a shared earspool. Only their headdresses sometimes distinguish them. These headdresses present icons that Genia Lepipero has shown are emblematic of social groups residing in specific settlements, denoting collectives, not individuality. The emphasis on co-action is not limited to the extreme images of jointness, like those typical of Travessia. We can consider the pairing of separate figurines, like this pair buried together at Cerro Palenque. They embody the interdependency of masked dancers and women providing drink in ceremonial events, activities whose traces remained around the buried bodies of these figurines in the form of broken and discarded brewing vessels and pottery figural instruments that had been used in ceremony. The assemblage of figurines juxtaposes two anthropomorphic beings as materially independent, yet interdependent subjects belonging to distinct categories of actors. These categories of actors appear in different proportions in different media. Figurines depict both masked dancers and women presenting pots. These themes are found in similar numbers. Women are more rarely depicted on polychrome pots, where ritual dancers dressed in male costume are the most common repeated human subjects. Yet the prior actions of women on which rituals depended are indicated by the presence of the vessels they carried to the site of ceremony. Using the pots themselves to share drinks was only possible because of women's actions. These objects thus point to a temporal sequence, reminding us of the multiple temporalities of different ball courts in the Ural region, but on a more intimate scale. The temporality of the preparation for and performance of a ritual, of days rather than seasons. In dance performance captured on many vessels, we see the movement between one step and another, but the pots themselves point to the slightly longer interval from dancing to drinking that together made up the ceremony. The subtlety of representation of relations can be seen in details of each figural sculpture, no matter how generic they may seem. Things as simple as contrasting placement of hands distinguishes the activity of one figure in each pair here. The male at Copan grasps the wrist of a woman who we identify as originating in the Ulúa area. In the figurine excavated in the Ulúa Valley, in contrast, the woman, her teeth filed using a practice associated with higher status families, reaches for the hand of a male partner. The active partner differs in these cases. People are free to create new forms of social relations. The heterogeneous nature of participation in social life stems from that freedom to create new forms of social relations. We can return to the difference between seated and standing figures in scenes of participation in ritual on Ulúa polychrome vessels to reconsider the ways effects are staged by the cylinder form itself. In this example, turning the pot alternately frames a seated figure or the standing pair shown burning incense. Political relations become matters of time, place, and perspective. For the person who was sometimes seated on a carved stone bench, a rarity obtained through low-volume exchange over long distance from Costa Rica and Nicaragua, an Ulúa polychrome pot showing someone seated on such a bench may have denoted a relationship of difference asserted as one of domination. But as the fluctuations in prosperity, settlement size, and wealth seen over time in the Ulúa region suggest, such effects were subject to resistance, or better, using Audra Simpson's analysis of indigenous strategies for enduring and surviving colonial power, refusal, using the freedom to refuse to follow orders. So we can return to the beginning. We could view the relations in the scene painted on this Ulúa polychrome as those of dependency of the standing ritualist on the seated figure, but that would be seen like a state. Or we could attend to the engagement between the standing figures in the scenes, and the degree to which the seated figure becomes part of their setting, a furnishing of the scene. At certain moments, there were attempts by some people, like those seated in the plastered buildings of Travessia, to assert greater centrality in social life. Jeannie Lopipro has shown that residents of the main house compound at Travessia located their ball court along axes intersecting a shared sacred mountain on the south and seasonal sunrise and sunset on the east and west horizons, making a claim to cosmic centrality. Christina Luke has demonstrated that the residents of this same place were patrons of the main workshop carving marble vases, which she argues were portable effigies of that sacred mountain. Yet these attempts to create a more socially important central place did not result in an enduring installation of Travessia as a regional capital. Refusal of the relations proposed by the orientation of the site in cosmic space and of the patronage of marble vase production was possible through an exercise of freedom. I'm going to leave it there and thank you for the opportunity to share this. And I look forward to having a chance in the Q&A to possibly continue to explore some of these ideas.
Thank you, Professor Joyce. That was wonderful. Since I have the privilege of being host, I'm of course going to cut in line and ask you a question from myself first.
Quite.
I'm just fascinated by some of the materials that you showed me. I mostly work in the Mediterranean, and the different materials, especially the ones that feature animals, are just fascinating from this region. I'm a zoo archaeologist, and I often notice that that in many places the figurines that prize humans are often showcased even more up front sometimes, but they're often the only ones that are showcased at all in museums. And so I wondered if you could speak a little bit about the ongoing materiality of these remnants of the past, and how the way that people use them today might also shape the image of how these societies worked.
Absolutely. I think you're putting your finger on something really important, that in the book Material Relations with Julie Hendon and Jeannie Lopipro, we foreground. When you actually look at the proportions of figurines, animal subjects are more common than human subjects. But that's not what we exhibit. That's not we, as humans, especially humans from a Euro-American perspective, we are human-centric. We have to get beyond that to begin to recognize that the world that the Lenca ancestral people are showing us is a world in which the interdependency is an interdependency of humans and non-humans, non-human animals, but also non-human forces of nature, like the rivers and the mountains. The animals then become really, really important. They're the first active subjects in Ulúa polychromes. And I've argued that they actually represent the ancestral spirits, the patrons of the different social groups that give them distinction. The people of Travessia were members of the House of the Monkey. And Monkey was part of their long-standing identity. The other thing, just since you are a zooarchaeologist, I'd say about this is the actual remains that we have zooarchaeologically of animal use is not congruent with what we see in the visual culture. So there are certain animals that are really important that don't appear usually. The deer, for example, is very rare in the visual culture and dominant, and that suggests that deer occupy a different position within the human and non-human relations, perhaps even being seen more like humans. So it's critical to pay attention to those kinds of things.
I agree. Seeing this from their perspective, understanding the art through their perspective is the main priority.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll jump to our Q&A. We've got several questions that are focused on compelling people to do things,
Yes.
asking whether things are voluntary. I wonder if I push these buttons, maybe these questions will come up. Yes. So Christine Henderson asked, how is it determined that individuals were not compelled to attend a ball game? That is, they attended voluntarily. And then there's also a question about how did people remain independent in their social organization, considering the hierarchical order of neighboring societies? I believe these are pretty related questions from Christine Henderson and Celio Barreto.
Yeah. So the first one about our argument that there isn't a compelling force being exercised over people. We have no imagery of violence or domination in this area until very, very late. So after 800 AD, and then only in one sort of circumscribed area where, interestingly, most of the sites in the valley, it's a different valley, and their valley bottom are abandoned, and people move up to a mesa top and they build a wall around it. So we kind of think that there they were having some conflict with their neighbors. But in most of the area that we're talking about, we have no evidence of fortifications or any form of warlikeness until the Spanish start coming in the in the 16th century, and then they do build fortifications. This goes along with, again, a historically known practice of Lenca people. Spanish had a hard time conquering the Lenca because they were decentralized. They were not united. They were, each individual town it was and is its own thing. But that's not to say they didn't have some sort of social relations. They have reciprocal visits that continue today under Christianity, where the patron saint of one town goes to visit the patron saint of another town. And these reciprocal visits were described by the Spanish as a pact of peace. So there were social means that people used, largely drawing on religion, to basically keep institutional violence down. We have come to accept the idea that institutional violence is automatically an outcome of any kind of complex society, of any society that has any degree of wealth. But one of the things Graeber and Wengrow urge us to do is to re-examine the actual historical record, because there are a lot of examples where social relations keep violence and therefore hierarchy down. We just, as archaeologists, we've kind of liked the kingdoms and the empires, and we've kind of seen them as more interesting. So we're kind of responsible for spreading the idea that those are the best things. I think Celio Barreto's question, how were they able to remain independent in their social organization? It actually adds, considering the hierarchical nature of neighboring societies. You have to remember that neighboring here doesn't mean half an hour away. The Maya city-state of Copan and its close allies, even today, it takes 4 hours by car to get there through a very mountainous terrain. So one answer is the area I'm working in is very far, actually, from that. It's close by water, so people used canoes for the trade, and that's how the connections were made. But the more significant answer, I think, is again something that we see in the 16th century when the Spanish arrive, which is that these are people who fiercely defend themselves. They're not normally violent, but when they need to be, they got organized and they kept the Spanish out of their territory for 12 years in the face of all sorts of challenges. So it's a value. If it's a value, then you keep it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll move on to another related question. We have two that are about the potential for militaries and war. Srinair says, many hierarchical states invest heavily in their militaries and in war. Is there any evidence suggesting that the absence of an identifiable ruler correlates with a less militaristic society? It's true. These don't have to necessarily be tied together. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, what we have as our evidence for militarism would be archaeologically three kinds of phenomena in the absence of written documents, and they were not using the Maya script to write their history, so we don't have that. But the three kinds of evidence we could look for, one is fortifications or placement of sites in defensible locations, and as you saw with the settlement pattern, that's not what they're doing. They're living just along the rivers. There's no evidence of palisades, no evidence of walls, no evidence of ditches until the Spanish are around, and then they develop them. The second would be weapons that would be especially appropriate for this. And again, in the period when the Spanish enter, we see the rise of very small atlatl dart points, which are the kind that are more appropriate for interpersonal warfare. They're not actually very good hunting things. If you want to hunt a bird with an atlatl dart, you're in the tropical forest, it's kind of not the right way to do it, and it's not how people do it. We don't have those atlatl dart points during the period I'm talking about, between 500 and 1,000. And the third kind of evidence that we might have would be a visual representation of warriors. And fascinatingly, we don't have that, as I said, until this one area near a site called Tenampua, a hilltop fortress. And then their Ulúa polychromes are full of warrior figures at the time that we have fortifications. So there's kind of nice confirmation that we don't have any kind of a full-time military force.
Interesting. To tack on to your comment on some of the stone tools, we did get a question from Henry Schaefer who asked, what kinds of stone tools were there, and were there workshops of production, I believe, for the stone tools as well?
Yeah, this is a great question, and I'm a ceramicist. I always have to apologize to my dear colleagues who are lithic specialists, but I need to apologize for my entire sort of cohort of colleagues. Stone tools are understudied in this area. That said, we have a vast number of grinding stones, which are made from locally available lavas, basically, volcanic stones. We know where the stone sources are. We haven't found workshops for their production, just as with the marble vases. What we found is that the traces, the residues from the marble making are fairly limited. We do have a lot of evidence, though, for the production of obsidian tools, especially obsidian blade working. And obsidian blade working is pretty much distributed across the entire social world. So it's not limited to certain centers. We find obsidian blades being made almost everywhere until the period when my dissertation site in the 9th century rises up. This is when the systems of exchange that brought obsidian into the area are being disrupted because Maya city-states are collapsing. And during this period, only the big family, the sort of patron family at Cerro Palenque, has a lot of obsidian. Everybody else is using the blade tool technology on local church and quartzites that actually have a very high failure rate. So we do know that there's the skills are there. People shift them to new materials. And I'm thinking that there's some other stone working other than the marble that I should remember, but we have marble workshops. We have obsidian working. We don't have obsidian. We have andesite bifaces, but they're not being made there. They're coming in from somewhere else. And I apologize because I really I'm not organized enough about this.
That's okay. That's okay. It's a fascinating place with all of these different tools and materials coming in.
Yeah.
And the interconnectedness also is
Yeah.
wonderful. Oh, we had someone pop in the chat and ask Jade if Jade is
Jade.
included.
Oh, this is a really good question. So we have jade early. The jade sources are relatively close to Honduras, so Copan and the Ulúa Valley, a site I worked at called Puerto Escondido, which was occupied from before 1500 BC on. We have early jade in those sites, and at Puerto Escondido, they're definitely working it. But people in the Ulúa region shift their preference from jade to marble. They shift their preference from greenstone to whitestone for most of the history until around 800 when they start liking greenstone again. But when they start liking greenstone again, it's green marble. They go and find a green marble source. So they're making marble vases, but out of green marble. During that long period that really they prefer the white stones, which is, about 1,000 years from about 500 BC till about, actually more than that, isn't it? So it's about 1,300 years. Oh my goodness. Um, there is some use of jade, but they even select for jade that's whitish in color, albite.
That's fascinating. I
Yeah,
love this transition from between the colors and then also the materials
yeah.
moving in preference
You
to
can tell it's the color that they're caring about because they keep the stone type.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we have many questions, but we have reached the end of our hour, and this is Archaeology Hour. And so I believe we'll have to leave it there. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I saw at one point that our participants went up to, I believe, 604 people. So thank you so much for joining us here today. And thank you, Professor Joyce. I hope everyone can clap in the
Thank you all so
Thank you
much.
so much. This was fascinating.
And it's lovely to have had the chance to share this with everybody. And I want to thank the interpreters too, because I know I speak very quickly because I'm from New York State originally.
Thank you. Thank you. Very well done. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.